We continue now at the top of Daf Chaf Beizam and Beizam Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 22b. The Gemara is finishing to explain why Rav would have been concerned and would have made a bracha at the beginning of his aliyah, but would not necessarily have been as concerned to make the bracha at the end. The Gemara says, Meipak lo nafki, because of the covet of Rav, people wouldn't leave shul early, as Rashi over here says. Meipak lo nafki hilkach lefoneh baruch. Therefore, the first bracha he made, Gezerah misham hanichnasin, because he was afraid, what if someone came in late to shul? So they're not going to realize the bracha was made at the beginning, before the Kriyas HaTorah, so he makes the bracha before his aliyah. Like we said before, but he didn't make the bracha at the end. He's not worried people are going to leave early. They're going to stay through because of, again, the covet of Rav, and therefore they're going to see the bracha that's made at the very end of the Kriyas HaTorah. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here the following proof. The question of the Gemara in the previous summon was, when it comes to a Tainas Tzibor, are there 3 aliyahs or are there 4 aliyahs? Gemara says, Zahaklal, this is the rule, Kol sheyeshbo bittul melacha la'am, any situation where the people are supposed to be doing work, and if they have a long davening, there's going to be bittul melacha, they're not going to be able to do their work. Could go in Tainas Tzibor v'Tisha B'Av, for example, at the public fast day or Tisha B'Av, so Koren Gimel, so then we only do 3 aliyahs. V'shein bo bittul melacha la'am, but if you have a situation where it's not causing people not to work, could go in Rosh Chodashim v'Chol Shel Moed, for example, on Rosh Chodesh or Chol Moed, so Koren Dala, then you call up 4 people to the Torah. Shema Mina, you see from here that by a Tainas Tzibor, it's only going to be 3 aliyahs. As Rashi over here says, Zaklal kol sheyesh bo bittul malacha la'am b'meshein ma'achron b'beis hakneses, meaning again, if it's too long in shul, they're not going to be able to go to work. Go in Tainas Tzibor shemutar b'malacha, and in Tainas Tzibor you're allowed to work. Rov Tainas Tzibor mutar b'malacha chutz mishal geshamim emtsoim v'achronim. Most of the public fast days you're allowed to do malacha, except when you're fasting for rain. The middle set of fasts and the last set of fasts, there are various sets of fasts for rain, so those are the exceptions. But otherwise you're allowed to do work. Tisha B'Av nami mutar b'malacha el b'makam shanago. Tisha B'Av also, it's mutter to do work on Tisha B'Av unless it's a place where there's a minhag specifically not to. Rosh Chodashim, now in Rosh Chodesh, ein bo bittul malacha kol kach. It's not such a bittul malacha if you have a long davening. Shein hanoshim osos malachas behen, because it comes out for women, for example, on Rosh Chodesh, there's no work on Rosh Chodesh anyway. V'achinam yamim Meseches Rosh Hashanah gavi masuas misham bittul malacha liyam shnei yamim. We say a similar thing over there in Meseches Rosh Hashanah. V'shamatim mipi mori hazaken zal shenitnu lehem mitzvah zu b'shvil shelo pirku nizmein be'egel. Rashi says, I heard from my Rebbe that the reason why they have the special mitzvah not to do work on Rosh Chodesh is because it's a reward for them, because the women didn't take off their jewelry and participate in the sin of the Egel Hazav in that fashion. Rashi over here continues, Umoed nami lav bittul malacha la'am, when it comes to Chol HaMoed as well, it's not a bittul malacha, sharei boin lebeis hakneses yoser mimos hachol. In general, people come to the shul more than they do during the weekdays, lefi she'ein osin bo malacha ela b'davar avid, because on Chol HaMoed, really we don't do malacha, except in situations where it involves a loss of money. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Ashi says, V'anon lo tanan hachi, but in our Mishnah it's not implied that way. In other words, you're saying that when it comes to Tainas Tzibor there's only 3 aliyahs. That doesn't seem to be the case from our Mishnah. Because what does our Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, Za'aklal, this is the rule, Kol yom sheyesh bo musaf ve'eno yamtiv, any day where there is musaf, where there's an addition to davening and it's not a yamtiv, koren arba, you're going to have 4 aliyahs. Lasuye mai, what is that rule coming to include? La'av lasuye, Tainas Tzibor v'Tisha B'Av, isn't it coming to include these exact cases? It's coming to say, not only in the cases that we quoted, like Chol HaMoed or Rosh Chodesh, but even Tainas Tzibor and Tisha B'Av also should be 4 aliyahs. But the Gemara says, 1 second. Rav Ashi, but according to Rav Ashi, Masnisin Money, who exactly is the author of our Mishnah? As Rashi over here says, Rav Ashi damar zeha klal de Masnisin la'asuye nami Tisha B'Av de isbei musaf tfilas anenu. Rav Ashi here is arguing that Tisha B'Av is included. It has 4 aliyahs because there's a musaf, there's an additional prayer of tfilas anenu. But who is that going to follow? Masnisin Money, who's the author of our Mishnah? Lo Tanakama v'lo Rabbi Yossi. It's not going to follow the Tanakama, and it's not going to follow Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, and Rashi over here says, Masnisin Money chol lios gabe Tisha B'Av Tanya la b'shmaita b'saraisa the Meseches Tainis. This Braisa we're about to quote, it's referring to Tisha B'Av. It's in the final sugya of Meseches Tainis. The Braisa says regarding Tisha B'Av, chol lios b'shenu v'chamishi. Let's say Tisha B'Av falls out on a Monday or on a Thursday. Koren Gimel. So what we do is we have 3 aliyahs, just like any Monday and Thursday you have 3 aliyahs. And the final aliyah is going to be maftir, that's going to be for the Haftorah. B'shlishu Revi, now if Tisha B'Av falls out on a Tuesday or Wednesday, so Korei Echad u'maftir Echad. According to the Tanakama, you just read 1 aliyah, and that becomes the Haftorah. 1 aliyah, that's the maftir, and then you go right to the Haftorah. Rabbi Yossi says, Liolam Koren Gimel u'maftir Echad. No, you always call up 3 aliyahs. It doesn't matter if it's a Monday or Thursday or Tuesday or Wednesday. It's always going to be 3 aliyahs, and the last one is going to be maftir. So in any case, it's clear from this brisa, you're not going to have on Tisha B'Av 4 aliyahs. So the Gemara says, V'yala kasha zeh haklal. So the Gemara says, okay, but we do have a kasha of Rav Ashi's point. Rav Ashi said zeh haklal seems to be including something. What is it including? So the Gemara answers, lo, it's not difficult. Lasuya Rosh Chodesh U'Moed. The zeh haklal is coming to include Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed. Those are going to be the days when you have 4 aliyahs. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Ha-behedra katanila. That it says explicitly. But Rosh Chodesh U'Moed, Koran Arba, it says on Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed. You call up 4 aliyahs. What do you mean it's coming to include something that's already in the Mishnah? And so the Gemara answers, Simona bi'alma yoev. The Mishnah over here is giving just a siman. The reason why we're repeating something we already know through this zeh haklal is to give you a way of understanding. Because maybe you're going to say, why should yontif be any different than chol hamoed? Chol hamoed is just part of yontif. No, it's not true. That's what the Mishnah is saying at the end. The Mishnah is saying at the end that there's the following rule you should have in your hand. Any type of situation where there's something additional in that day more than the other day. There's something more to yontif, for example, than there is to chol hamoed. So tafilei gavra yaseira. You're going to have an extra aliyah in such a situation. Hilkach, therefore, Rosh Chodesh Hamoed dika karban musaf Koran Arba. On Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed, when you have a karban musaf, you have 4 aliyahs. B'yontif, when you have yontif, the asur b'asiyas malacha, which has an additional concept that it's asur to do malacha. Chamisha, you're going to have 5 aliyahs. B'yom HaKippurim da'onish kares. On Yom Kippur, where there's an additional factor that there's a punishment of kares. Shisha, there's going to be 6 aliyahs. And Shabbos, the Iko Isser Skila Shabbos, which has an additional factor that it's so strict that there's an Isser Skila. So Shiva, that's going to be 7 aliyahs. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we quoted above, Rav Ikla leBavel b'Taina Sibor. It said that Rav went to Bavel, and it was a Taina Sibor. Kam Kara b'Sifra. He got up, he was called to the Torah. Pasach, when he started, Baruch, he made a bracha. Chasam v'lo Baruch, when he finished, he didn't make a bracha. And then it said, Nafel kuli alma al anpayu. It said that everybody, they fell on payu, they did tachanun. V'Rav lo nafel al anpay, but Rav, he didn't say tachanun, he didn't fall on his face. So the Gemara says, my time Rav, lo nafal alape. Why didn't Rav do tachanun? Everyone else was doing tachanun. Why didn't he do tachanun as well? So the Gemara answers, ritzba shel avonim haisa. Gemara answers, the floor was made out of stones, and Rav felt you're not allowed to fall on your face. You can't do the tachanun. You can't bow on the floor when the floor has stones. But Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, if you haven't maskis lo sitnu bi'artzachem lishtachavos aleha, it says that you can't put these stones to bow upon them. So on the Evan Maskis, you're not allowed to bow in your lands. The point is, in the Beis HaMikdash, you're allowed to bow on a floor of stones, but outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it's a problem. Kedula, like Ula says, Diyamar Ula, as Ula said, Lo Asra Torah el Ritzba shel Avonim Bilvad. The Torah only says that the problem is you're not allowed to do this kind of bowing on a floor made out of stones, and that's why Rav was strict in this situation not to do the tachanun. So the Gemara says, Yachi, if so, Ma'ir Rav. What do you have to? Why is it only Rav? Afilu kulu nami. Even everybody else, everyone else also should have been strict and not done nefilas abayim on the ritzvah shel avonim. And so the Gemara answers, Kamei de Rav havoy. The stone floor was only in front of Rav. It wasn't in front of everybody else, so it was only an issue for him. So the Gemara says, so why didn't Rav go to where the rest of the congregation was standing, and he should do nefilas apayim over there? So the Gemara says, he didn't want to bother the tzibur. If he was going to walk over to them, they'd all have to stand up, so he didn't want to give them this burden. The Gemara answers further, V'bayisem, if you want, I could say another answer. Rav pishut yadayim v'raglayim have ovid. Rav, when he used to do tachanun, he used to spread out his hands and his feet, as Rashi over here says. Pishut yadayim v'raglayim k'shaya nofel al panav. When he would do nefilas apayim, when he would say tachanun, he would stretch out his hands and his feet. Usharat tzibur lo hayosim kain. The rest of the tzibur, they wouldn't do that. Uchidu ula, and the Gemara says this follows ula. The Amar ula, because ula said lo asra Torah la pishut yadayim v'raglayim bilvad. The Torah only prohibited when we say you can't do it on a stone floor. That's if you're stretching out your hands and your feet. So for Rav, that was a problem. For everybody else, it wasn't an issue. But the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, well, why didn't he just do nefilas apayim? And he shouldn't. This time, he won't stretch out his hands and his feet. So the Gemara says, lo mashani mimin hage. He didn't want to change from his normal custom. And the Gemara answers another answer, if you want, I could say as follows, Adam chashav shani. When it comes to somebody who's an important individual, such a person should conduct himself in a different manner. Kid Rebbe Lazar, just like Rebbe Lazar says. The Amar Rebbe Lazar, because Rebbe Lazar says, Ein Adam chashav rashoy lipol al panav. A person who's an important individual, he's not even allowed to fall upon his face. Elim keinena ki Yehoshua ben Nun, unless he's certain that he's going to be answered like Yehoshua ben Nun. Rashi over here says, it wasn't even his custom to do tachanun. He wouldn't do this. An important individual, individual is not supposed to do that. So unless he's certain he's going to be answered, it's not appropriate that an Adam Chashav is going to do Tachanun and then it won't be answered. It's going to be almost like a Chil Hashem in such a situation, and therefore an Adam Chashav should not do Nefilas Apayim in front of the Tzibor, again, unless he's answered like Yoshua ben Nun. And the Gemara says, Dichsiv, like the Pasuk says by Yoshua, Vayomer Hashem al Yoshua kum loch, V'gomer Hashem says to Yoshua, you have to get up. As Rashi over here says, the Pasuk finishes off, Lo mazeh tanofel al panecha, why are you falling on your face? Alma ein lo lasos. You see, again, it's not appropriate for an Adam Chashav to do Nefilas Apayim. The Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Keda al Apayim. Anytime you see that the Pasuk says the word Keda, it refers to bowing on one's face. Shenemar, like the Pasuk says, Vatikod basheva Apayim oretz. It uses this word Vatikod, and it's talking about, again, al Apayim. The Gemara continues, Kriya al Birkayim, when it uses the word Kriya, it means to bow on the knees, V'chein hu omer, and that's what the Pasuk says, Mikroa al Birkav. Again, uses the word Mikroa, Kriya, and it's referring to bowing on one's knees. Hishtachavo, if the word Hishtachavo is used, Zupishot yadayim v'raglayim, that refers to spreading out the hands and the legs. Shenemar, like the Pasuk says, Havo, Novo, Aniva, Imchav Yachecho, Lihishtachavos l'cho arza. It says, we're going to bow to you on the ground. As Rashi over here says, Arza mashma kulo shatuach arza. You're all spread out on the ground. Again, that's Pishot yadayim v'raglayim. And the Gemara continues, Levi achvi keda kame de Rebbe. Levi demonstrated how to do keda in front of Rebbe. Again, we said that keda is on one's face. As Rashi over here says, achvi keda, no, it's godla v'nishan aleim. He used his thumbs and he rested his whole body upon them. V'shochat shenoshik l'ritzban. He bowed himself until he kissed the floor. V'zokef, and stood himself up in this manner. Umitoch sheno yachli shan al godla v'en yadam esayin oso b'zikifasa. Now, since it's very hard to hold yourself up, to support yourself up in such a manner, but tzarach li'sam it's b'mosnav, so then you got to use the power of the person's thighs. So that's why he ended up getting injured, as we're going to say over here. Levi ended up becoming crippled because of this activity. Gemara says v'itla, he ended up becoming lame from demonstrating this keda. He had some kind of dislocation of his hip, and so the Gemara says v'haka garmale. 1 second, is that really what caused this injury to Levi? V'yomer Rebbe Lazar, but Rebbe Lazar said, Liolam al yatiach adam devarim klape mala. A person shouldn't speak harshly towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sharei adam gadol hitiach devarim klape mala, because there was a great individual who spoke words, so to speak, against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'itlan, he became lame. Umanu, and who is this individual? Levi. It was actually Levi. So we see actually it was a different thing that caused him to become lame. So the Gemara says, ha v'ha garmale, really both of them caused it. It was number one, that he was hitiach devarim klape mala, but also it actually happened when he demonstrated the keda in front of Rebbe. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chia bar Rav, and Rav Chia bar Rav says, Chazina luhu la'abaya. I saw Abaya, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph.